So to focus on noise and noise management, we have with us John Godson, who's Assistant Director of Sustainability, as well as Colette Zreiby, who's Aircraft Noise Management Specialist. They'll walk us through the balanced approach. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me at the back? Because we're going to be talking about aircraft noise. Let's see, start with that one. So yes, once again, we have seen noise emerging as a key local environmental challenge for the sector that can have global consequences for connectivity. There is increasing community activism targeting noise at airports in urban areas, particularly in Europe, and it's encouraging impulsive actions from politicians. Aircraft noise, clearly generated by turbulent flows of air going around and into engines, around the airframes, fuselage, wings, flaps, and landing gear. Despite significant improvements in noise reduction over the last 40 years, part of these gains have been countered by increasing traffic. Aircraft noise is the most significant cause of adverse community reaction related to the operation and expansion of airports, and noise complaints are on the rise. But complaints themselves don't tell the whole story. In 2022, one individual lodged 23,431 complaints, 90% of all complaints about noise from aircraft at Dublin Airport. The impacts of aircraft noise reflect a complex interrelationship between the physical phenomenon of sound and its perception by humans. And whilst it's recognised that aircraft noise is a source of annoyance and can be a source of sleep disturbance, there is insufficient evidence at present to conclude that aircraft noise causes other health issues. This area is being subject to intensive research, with at least 43 academic papers being published in the 6-month period between March and September of this year, and clearly establishing a causal link for individuals living and working close to airports who are already exposed to multiple sources of noise, including road traffic, is challenging. But IATA will continue to monitor the developments in this particular area. In 2001, the ICAO Assembly adopted the principle of the balanced approach to aircraft noise management as a coherent method to address aircraft noise and a foundation for noise regulation for the aviation industry as a whole. It's based on 4 main principles. Firstly, reducing noise at source. This is the primary mechanism for reducing noise, with each generation of new aircraft being on average 15% quieter than the generation they replace. This trend will continue with the introduction of higher bypass ratio engines in the new generation of single-aisle aircraft, of geared turbofans, of acoustic liners, and improved fan designs. Aerodynamic airframes will also help reduce noise generated from flaps and from landing gear deployment on approach. Land use planning and noise impact management is crucial to ensure that residential, commercial, and industrial developments are not located in areas where aircraft can impact health or welfare. Airports attract not only passengers and cargo customers, but also act as magnets for jobs and local businesses. As noise contours around airports fall, planning authorities must not allow the encroachment of inappropriate land uses driven by this particular demand. Planning failures are costly. They require retrofitting of sound insulation in homes, compensation programs, land buyback schemes, often recovered through expensive airport charges. The third pillar, improved noise abatement procedures, includes the use of preferential runways and routings, plus noise abatement and takeoff and approaches. And they have an important role to reduce noise locally. New technologies, including performance-based navigation, enabling continuous climb and descent, will play an increasingly important role in reducing noise. Finally, operational restrictions. Operational restrictions including aircraft types, night curfews, noise quotas and budgets, and capacity reductions should only be considered when all other options have been exhausted. The balanced approach follows a rigorous 6-stage implementation process, starting from a scientific noise assessment, setting of noise objectives, reviewing measures, analysis of cost effectiveness, all the way through to selection and finally implementation. The implementation process is underpinned by stakeholder consultations throughout and allows for dispute resolution. For 55 years, ICAO has led noise reduction in the sector through noise certification and more recently through the balanced approach. Since its adoption in 2001, the balanced approach has been the main international mechanism to address noise concerns for communities, whilst maintaining and growing the socio-economic benefits of aviation. In part, it was introduced to avoid state disputes, as happened between the EU and the US over the hush kits back in the early 2000s. The balanced approach was enshrined in EU law back in 2014 and is included in US and EU air service agreements. However, recent political decisions in Europe seem to have overlooked these legal aspects and the lessons of history. My colleague Colette will now provide a little bit more of an overview of some of the challenges encountered if the balanced approach isn't applied correctly, with some case studies. Colette.
If the balanced approach is not followed and operating restrictions are imposed without considering the first three pillars of the balanced approach, the consequences can include reduced connectivity. For passengers, this means increase of their travel time, their cost, and their inconvenience, since there will be, of course, fewer flights available. And for cargo, reduced connectivity will impact time-sensitive transport and perishable goods. Operating restrictions has also negative financial impacts, not only onto airlines, but the whole industry stakeholders. They will impact tourism, but also business and trade by increasing the cost and reducing revenues of firms that rely on international markets and international transport. Uncoordinated and unilateral decisions can also violate international agreements, leading to international disputes over unfair competition and trade disputes. This recently happened when the USA requested a special joint committee meeting with the European Commission under the US-EU Air Transport Agreement in the case of Schiphol's airport capacity reduction. And finally, operating restrictions could lead to congestion of airports, increasing the operational complexity and uncertainty for airlines, affecting their fleet planning, their historical slots, if any, and also impacting the passenger experience. Therefore, it's important to follow the balanced approach to aircraft noise management, as it's the most effective and sustainable way to address the noise concerns when enabling the growth and development of air transport. Although the concept of the balanced approach is endorsed by ICAO members and has been adopted in the EU law, recent cases in Europe highlight flaws in this application. I will describe 3 cases here where the balanced approach has been either totally ignored, undertaken in the wrong order, or being undermined by conflicting other planning laws. Firstly, in Amsterdam, there are 2 separate tracks to reduce capacity. Both reductions were announced prior to the balanced approach being undertaken. In the first track, the balanced approach was ignored, and in the second track, the balanced approach has been undertaken in the wrong order. The first track was introduced in 2022 by the Dutch government under an experimental regulation as an interim capacity reduction. Early 2023, IATA legally challenged the first draft of this experimental regulation for violating the EU Regulation 598/2014, and we managed to postpone its implementation from November 23 until March 24. The industry is not the only one to find this regulation unlawful. If the US government and the European Commission haven't intervened, the regulation wouldn't have been suspended. Track 2 aims to reduce the airport's capacity through a reverse-engineered balanced approach process. IATA and the industry contest the Dutch government's approach. The predetermined objective, the short deadlines, the cost-effective measures ignored, the use of obsolete methodology, and aircraft data dating from 2014 are not in line with the balanced approach as described by ICAO and EU regulation. The second case illustrated here is in Belgium, where restrictions at Brussels airports were announced prior to the balanced approach being undertaken. In July 2023, the Belgian Transport Minister proposed banning night flights from October 2024 at Brussels Airport through a revised noise quota count system. Only a select list of stakeholders was able to review and comment on the draft. IATA was not part of the consultation process. A socioeconomic impact study is expected to be produced for 2024, which needs to be shared in a transparent manner with the parties. And in the last case is Dublin Airport. It's a very unique issue because the quota count system intended to replace the 65 aircraft movement cap is now being put on hold until legal challenges associated with planning laws have been resolved.
Thanks, Colette. So you can see balanced approach, robust science-based procedure that identifies the optimal solution needed to achieve a particular noise objective. It can deliver cost-effective solutions, avoid legal disputes, and provide certainty for planning in terms of airlines, airports, and customers. There's emerging evidence that the balanced approach is being reverse engineered to justify operational restrictions being motivated by short-term political gains. As long as the balanced approach continues to be undermined in this capacity, we're likely to see inappropriate noise objectives, threats not only to passenger and business continuity, but also the concept of noise leakage as neighboring airports attempt to absorb the capacity that's being cut. There's danger that that this will spread outside of Europe and other countries will adopt a similar short-sighted approach. Governments themselves will face costly legal actions, infringement decisions, and threats of retaliation from third parties. And finally, airlines will face costs, uncertainties in fleet planning, and also uncertainties under slot coordination. And with slots, I now hand over to my colleague John to explain more.